to the Wednesday edition of A Proud Malcontent. I'm Pete Bell and I am a proud malcontent. And as ever, it was a mad panic at the last moment with things going wrong just before we came on air. So if I seem a bit flustered, well, that'll just be normal, won't it? What we're looking at today, first of all, I wanted to mention, and I did have a screenshot of this for you, but that's one of the things that I've lost in the mad rush. But the event is now ready for the UN, sorry, the Salvo Liberation UN, the presentation, which is taking part in Geneva in Switzerland, and I had a date. It's the 18th of September, and this is when the Salvo Liberation team will be presenting their path to self-determination under international law to a committee of the UN. It's not really my place to be explaining these things. Salvo, or rather Liberation.Scot, I always get them mixed up. They have a very good newsletter. It's an occasional but very complete newsletter, the Summer 25 version of which is out at the moment. And if you go to that, I will provide links online. I did have links ready here, but I don't know if they will be clickable. I haven't tested that yet. But if you scroll down that newsletter, you'll find a link to Sarah Salyer's article called "Holding the Line," which is obviously worth reading because it's Sarah Salyer's. The highlighted part I have there. It says, the International Liberation Campaign is not designed to deliver independence itself, but in order to deliver a real route to the only thing that can deliver independence, the right to self-determination. Right, I felt it was necessary to clarify that again, because there's a lot of people seem to be running away with the idea that the Salvo Liberation UN initiative is going to restore independence, and it just isn't. There has to be a local, an internal political and parliamentary process in place, which can then exploit, take advantage of the fact that Scotland has been added to the non-self-governing territories list, if indeed that does happen. I think we're all hopeful. That political process has to be in place, a political and parliamentary process. And at the moment, it's rather distressing to note that there is no such process in place, nor have any of the nominally pro-independence parties issued any proposals for initiating such a process, least of all the SNP. And this is all relevant today to the next thing that I want to go on to, which is a letter in the National from a correspondent. Those of you who read the letters page, I do quite avidly. And Stan Gradinsky will be very familiar to you. And there was a letter from him, and I don't need to show you the letter because I'll be quoting from it as I read a response. So this is my response. In his letter to the National, it's under the title, "An Emphatic 2026 Win for the SNP will mean no excuses for inaction. It's dated 12th August 25. Stan Gradinsky makes some points that require a response. First, after pointing out that support for the Scottish Parliament is considerably higher than support for independence, Stan writes, "It does not take too much imagination to believe that a significant majority can be persuaded, with the help of some serious campaigning, to vote for that Parliament to have the legal authority to conduct a referendum." Right, that's quite an important point. My teleprompter's running rather slowly here, so yeah, I was pausing for a moment to let it catch up. I'm not going to interfere with it. But he's absolutely correct in this. It's a very important point in favour of the Scottish UDI plan for progressing Scotland's cause. Most people who have been involved in the fight to restore Scotland's independence for any length of time will realise that our wins must be emphatic. However unfair it may be, it's a fact that our opponents only have to scrape through to prompt proclamations of glorious victory in the British media. The smallest success for unionists is always some kind of blow to the separatists. Meanwhile, a win for the pro-independence campaign has to be quite extraordinary for the same media to so much as acknowledge it. That's just the nature of things when you're in a grotesquely asymmetric power relationship. And there is no more grotesquely asymmetric power relationship than that imposed on Scotland by the Union. The implication of this is that if the 2026 election is to be declared a de facto referendum, the smart thing is to make it a referendum we have the best chance of winning, and winning emphatically. That means making the de facto referendum about the powers of the Scottish Parliament in relation to facilitating the exercise of our right of self-determination. Thus, we make a notable victory the most likely outcome, while also taking the issue into the realm of human rights, the human right of self-determination. Who wouldn't vote in favour of their human rights being respected? Apart from those intent on voting for Reform UK, obviously. Stan goes on to suggest, excuse me a moment, must get a drink. Stan goes on to suggest independence parties should have the commitment to establishing the legal authority of the Scottish Parliament to conduct a constitutional referendum clearly stated as a primary clause in their manifestos, their election manifestos for 2026, backed up by stated actions to ensure that authority is granted to Holyrood. You know what's coming now, don't you? Again, the first part of this clearly echoes the Scottish UDI plan, which is for all pro-independence parties to include an identical commitment on the constitutional issue in their manifestos for the 2026 Holyrood election. This introduces a binary element which will make a positive result unambiguous and therefore more emphatic. As per Stan's earlier remarks, this commitment should be to restoring to the Scottish Parliament the legislative competence in constitutional affairs that rightly belongs with the Parliament actually elected by the people of Scotland, and not with some foreign Parliament. So far, so good. But then Stan veers disastrously off course when he writes, ensure that authority is granted to Holyrood. Granted, Stan? Granted? It seems that what Stan has in mind is transferred powers. That would be transferred powers as in a Section 30 order, because that is the very most that Westminster conceivably would or could transfer. Westminster cannot devolve powers that supersede its own. That would be unconstitutional, as well as being, from a Westminster perspective, an act of political idiocy that would topple Brexit from the top spot. But it cannot happen. The doctrine of parliamentary sovereignty forbids it, as does fundamental logic. The doctrine of parliamentary sovereignty holds that Westminster has the final say in all matters. Were it constitutionally possible for Westminster to transfer to Holyrood the power to legislate for a proper constitutional referendum, determinative and self-executing, this would mean that the people of Scotland had the final word. Westminster would have given away the veto over the will of Scotland's people afforded it by the Union. Even if this could be done, we can be certain that it wouldn't be done. The power to hold a proper constitutional referendum can only be taken. It cannot be granted. It cannot be given. This is why the Scottish UDI plan is for the Scottish Parliament to assert legislative competence in matters relating to the Union, that is to say, the Constitution, stating as the primary but not sole reason that this is the only way the people of Scotland can be enabled to exercise their right of self-determination. The power to hold a proper constitutional referendum can only be taken. It cannot be granted. I've already said that. I'm getting the same page coming up over and over again. Finally, there's this. Sorry about that. Finally, there's something. Oh, yes, this is another quote from Stan's letter. The more emphatic an SNP victory, the less excuse the SNP hierarchy will have for not taking substantive actions in support of a public mandate. Stan Grodzinski seems a bit confused here. In keeping with what was said earlier about our wins needing to be emphatic, this would also apply to an SNP victory. We might well question whether it's possible for an SNP victory to be emphatic enough to prevent the party leadership rationalising inaction. But the real problem here is that while Stan is clear about who should enjoy this emphatic victory, that's the SNP for those who haven't been paying attention, he appears to be deluding himself as to what this would be a victory for. He seems to be associating an SNP victory in the 2026 election with the Scottish Parliament acquiring the power to hold a proper constitutional referendum. But that is emphatically not what John Swinney is proposing. John Swinney is proposing nothing other than a request for a Section 30 order to enable a referendum that is about as far from being a proper constitutional referendum as may be imagined. Moreover, submitting that request for a Section 30 order is an act of unforgivable treachery, a vile betrayal of cause and country, a gross insult to the principle that is the very foundation of Scotland's constitution, democracy, and distinct national identity. The principle that the people of Scotland are sovereign is both a constitutional fact and an inviolable principle. By submitting this supplication in the name of the people of Scotland, Swinney legitimises the superiority of Westminster and confirms the subordinacy of Scotland within a political union so grotesquely asymmetric as to be the effective annexation of Scotland by England as Britain. A Section 30 request validates this annexation. This is indisputably an act of treachery. John Swinney has openly, even proudly, declared his intention to betray cause and country by denying the sovereignty of Scotland's people and endorsing the alien doctrine of parliamentary sovereignty, that is Westminster sovereignty. An emphatic victory for the SNP sanctions this act of treachery. It is a mandate for betrayal. It is the sovereign people of Scotland consenting to denial of the fact that they are sovereign. It is yet another new name on that trophy for the most insane act of political self-harm. We would be mad to vote SNP. Right, that is my response to Stan Gradinsky, and perhaps that needs a bit of explanation. First of all, it should seem obvious, and you have to ask, why is it not obvious to the professional politicians? It should seem obvious that requesting a Section 30 order is a treacherous act. It is a betrayal. It might even be called treasonous. Because it does deny the sovereignty of Scotland's people. It must deny the sovereignty of Scotland's people because it acknowledges the sovereignty of Westminster. It gives Westminster the last word over our exercise of our right of self-determination. And that just cannot be right. That is, as I say, an act of political idiocy. So I really cannot see how I cannot understand how the politicians haven't seen this. It's stupid for another reason, and that is that following the Scottish UDI plan would be asserting legislative competence in matters relating to the Constitution in order to exercise or facilitate, in order that the Parliament can facilitate the exercise of our right of self-determination in a proper constitutional referendum. That might be challenged by the UK government. It might not, but it might. In which case, one of their defences, one of their claims could be that there is an existing democratic means of us accessing the exercise of our right of self-determination, the Section 30 process. Westminster can claim that they can transfer the powers, and that will have a precedent, having been validated before in 2014 and many times since by those who expound the Sturgeon doctrine that the Section 30 process is a democratic gold standard and the only legal and constitutional route to independence. So it's been validated, and that is why it needs to be repudiated now. It needs to be repudiated now. It doesn't have to be validated all over again, which is what John Swinney intends to do. Now is the time to repudiate it. He's doing precisely the opposite of what needs to be done. If it is repudiated now, then the UK government no longer has that ground on which to claim that the Scottish Parliament's assertion of legislative competence is necessary for us to access our right of self-determination. They would say it's unnecessary. Their only other option or their only other grounds for legal action, a court action, would be to say that Scotland isn't a nation. Scottish people don't have the right of self-determination, blah, blah. They don't want to do that. We have a comment from Martin Morrison, who says, Sturgeon legitimised the Supreme Court's authority to deny us the second referendum. She was told not to do so, but she did. She even hired a unionist barrister to represent us in the Supreme Court. The betrayal started with her. I don't know about that, Martin, because we're talking here about the Section 30 process. What Sturgeon did was patently stupid. Just mind-bogglingly stupid. I could not believe she'd done it at the time. It just so stupid. And it certainly served to further legitimise the Section 30 process and to further legitimise Westminster's veto over our right of self-determination. What Sturgeon did was stupid because before she referred the referendum bill to I should say the draft referendum bill, before that was referred to the UK Supreme Court, Sturgeon had the power, she had the ability to get that through Parliament. She had the power to make it an act of Parliament. It would still have been blocked by the British state, obviously. They would have blocked it using Section 35, probably, or they might have gone to the UK Supreme Court. Who knows? But it would be an act of the Scottish Parliament, not just a draft bill, an actual act of the Scottish Parliament. Now, you know the fuss that there was when the UK government used the Section 35 process previously, and I'm not going to say what it was for because that gets us on a whole other subject, which I really don't want to get into another day maybe. But knocking back an act of the Scottish Parliament is a very different thing from knocking back just a draft bill. And the UK Supreme Court did indeed say that Scotland, the Scottish Parliament, doesn't have the power to have a constitutional referendum. But then that becomes meaningless if the Scottish Parliament does have the power. And the only way the Scottish Parliament can acquire that power is by taking it. So everything has to start from that point. Nothing proceeds unless that power is first taken. because as if you remember the Sarah Sawyer's quote from earlier on, let me just remind myself. The International Liberation Campaign is not designed to deliver its independence itself, but in order to deliver a real route to the only thing that can deliver independence, the right to self-determination. And as I said earlier, that there has to be a process, a parliamentary process, a political and parliamentary process. Political because it has to, first of all, be proposed by a political party, and parliamentary because, rather obviously, it has to go through Parliament to become an act. And this process, if we assume, as we must, that the 2026 election, we are fairly much in agreement here that this all of us, the whole independence movement, I mean, in agreement that the 2026 Scottish Parliament election should be used as the democratic event which triggers that local, internal political and parliamentary process that initiates it, that kicks it off. And what John Swinney is proposing very obviously doesn't do that. It brings it to a grinding halt because he requests a Section 30 order. He's told to off, and or he's just ignored. And we get another 5 years of SNP luminaries huffing and puffing because the nasty Westminster people rebuffed their polite request. What do they expect? Yeah, that's exactly. It's 99% certain that it will be rebuffed, and 99.9% of the independence movement knows that. Even the people who are supporting John Swinney expect that Section 30 order to be Section 30 order request to be knocked back. Even the people who are supporting him. That's SNP loyalists for you. It's not going to be the thing that initiates that process. Now, we must assume that every democratic event, such as the 2026 election, every national democratic event in Scotland, we have to assume, we have to work on the basis that it is our last chance. This is our last chance to initiate the process. And we've been mad to vote SNP because the SNP intend, they have stated explicitly that they intend to squander the opportunity to initiate the process. They intend to squander it with yet another request for a Section 30 order, which will almost certainly be refused, but which disastrously might not be refused. It's just possible that Starmer or someone around him might be smart enough to preempt the request by offering a Section 30 referendum, offering a Section 30 order. We would then expect John Swinney to grab that with both hands and hold it up in front of the Scottish people and say, "Look, people, see what I've won for you. See what the SNP has won for you." And it's poison. It is absolutely toxic. Because then what happens next is that the UK government starts to attach all sorts of conditions to that Section 30 referendum. A minimum qualified majority voting and the Westminster franchise, all that sort of thing. And some sort of sunset clause, given an unrealistic time. They could do absolutely anything, and it would make it unwinnable. with these conditions. They would make it as close to unwinnable as possible. But it couldn't be winnable anyway, because the Section 30 process is never anything other than consultative and non-self-executing. And the consultation, because that's all it is, a glorified opinion poll, the consultation goes not to the Scottish government, but to the UK government. It's the UK government, it's Westminster that assesses that consultation and says what's to be done with it. So the Westminster could just as easily say, right, well, obviously they're going to say that doesn't mean that you can be independent. They'll make up something else, a royal commission or whatever. So if, as we must assume, the 2026 election is our last chance, then we have to seize it. We have to absolutely seize it. And neither transfer powers nor a Section 30 order, because they are both the same thing. I'm sorry, Stan, but you're wrong about that. Neil Hanvey is wrong. Ash Regan is wrong. The idea that Westminster can permanently transfer the powers to have a proper constitutional referendum is a nonsense. The idea of permanently devolved powers is a nonsense in itself. Nothing that's devolved is devolved permanently. I mean, it's a nonsense. It's a logical nonsense. It's a semantic nonsense. It is just nonsense. And it's a nonsense anyway, because, as I already explained, Westminster cannot devolve powers that supersede its own. It cannot devolve to Scotland power that supersedes the power of Westminster. It cannot allow our word to be final. That is the whole point of this. Westminster is not denying us independence. They can't do that. International law prohibits it. They can't do that. They're not even denying our right of self-determination. They've acknowledged on numerous occasions, they've acknowledged our right of self-determination, not least with the Edinburgh Agreement. So if it's not independence and it's not a right of self-determination, what is it that Westminster is obstructing? You'll wait until I've had a drink. See, I built the tension there. Yeah, that is just water, by the way. What Westminster is actually blocking is access to the exercise of a right of self-determination. The politicians don't talk about that, obviously, because it's too many words. It doesn't fit into a snappy slogan. It's too complicated an idea. It needs some explanation. And politicians think everybody is stupid. They think all voters are stupid. They think because the electorate is dumb that voters are stupid, and they can't cope with something as moderately complicated and complex as the idea of access to the means of exercising a right of self-determination. They all reckon you won't understand that. So I have a bit more respect for the people of Scotland. I think they're perfectly capable of understanding that. We need that access to our right of self-determination. And it looks very much like we're not going to get it. We're not going to get it in 2026. And the reason I'm saying that, the reason I'm sounding kind of hopeless about it, is because the little bits of information that I'm getting back from my sources within the SNP are telling me that the provisional constitution, which has left out all branch resolutions regarding an independence strategy, shall we call it that for short. All those resolutions have been left out. There is only John Swinney's resolution, only the leadership resolution, and that is the one, the resolution, the intent to commit an act of treachery by requesting a Section 30 order. That's all that's left. That is the provisional agenda. It has to say that's the provisional agenda. So that could change. That could change. But the only way it could usefully change is if the Newington resolution got on it. Because the Newington resolution is like the Scottish UDI plan, starts off with the Scottish Parliament asserting legislative competence in constitutional affairs, because that's where any process has to start out. It has to start there. That is where it gets initiated. So it doesn't look like that's going to get through the Newington resolution. It's just too radical. It's too rich for the leadership's stomach. They can't cope with it. They're the ones that probably don't understand it. Not that it's complicated, but it's just not what they're accustomed to. It's radical, and it actually works. It actually does something about independence. But it requires them to be bold and imaginative. Have you had a look at the SNP leadership recently? There's no bold or imaginative amongst that lot, and it certainly doesn't apply to John Swinney. So it looks like the Newington resolution is not going to make it through. There is a slight possibility that another resolution will make it through. And that is, I'm not sure what to call it. I got into trouble for calling it the McCormick resolution after Graham McCormick, because he was the one that had an exchange with about it. He was the one who was explaining it online. And then I was told that it was to be called the Tweeddale resolution. And I've since been given a bit of stick for calling it the Tweeddale resolution, because there's so many other parties, so many other branches involved. So I don't know what to call it. I think I'll go back to calling it the McCormick resolution. Got to call it something. Why didn't they give it a name? They've just been calling it the resolution on behalf of 43 branches. Oh, that helps a lot. So and that doesn't help. That resolution doesn't help. It's because it only talks about going as far. It doesn't end in independence. That's not the end point. It ends at negotiations with Westminster around independence. That's how it's been explained to me. But it certainly doesn't end with independence. And yes, there will have to be negotiations with Westminster, but that's after independence. Independence must come first, so that Scotland is and then going into those negotiations. We can't possibly go into negotiations for a post independence settlement while we're still part of the UK. We can't be negotiating as a subsidiary part of the UK. You see, you know where the Union puts us in terms of Westminster and the relationship with Westminster. Imagine that. Imagine John Swinney going down to London tomorrow to negotiate our independence. What the hell would that look like? That's just a joke. No, the independence bit comes first. So there has to be a way that can be done. David Gregg asks, can you elaborate on getting access? Peter, how do we go about gaining access? Thank you for that, David. I presume Dave means access to the means to exercise our right of self-determination. Well, that can only be through the Scottish Parliament, uh, which is the Parliament of Scotland. I insist, it is the Parliament of Scotland. It was stolen from us in 1707. It's been returned to us, but it's been returned in chains. And we need to take back our Parliament. First of all, we need to take back our government. That means we take back the political parties that will form government, and we have to tell them what we want. We have to insist. We have to demand that they do what we want, instead of just sitting back meekly accepting whatever they're prepared to offer. I mean, here's John Swinney. John Swinney, and he's offering to commit an act of treachery, and people are just accepting it. And thousands of people will just accept that. They'll go out and vote SNP, totally unaware of what they're voting for. They only know who they're voting for. So it can only be through the Scottish Parliament, and it can only be by the Scottish Parliament asserting, that is, passing an act with which it takes the power to hold a constitutional referendum. Obviously, there's going to be legal challenges, or there's the risk of legal challenges. The Sturgeon doctrine was to avoid all legal challenges, avoid any possibility of a legal challenge. That meant a referendum was never going to happen. It never did. It never has, and that's the reason, because they're obsessed with avoiding legal challenges. What does that tell you about the Scottish government? What does that tell you about the SNP leadership? They have no confidence that they could beat a legal challenge. They've no confidence in the case for independence, as it's horribly called. They've no confidence in the people of Scotland. They can't argue for it, or they doubt their ability to argue for it. So they're trying to avoid any possibility of a legal challenge. So it can't happen, because there's inevitably going to be some kind of challenge at some time. If you're going to be independent, if you're going to restore Scotland's independence, if you say that's what it's going to do, what you're going to do, you have to be prepared to meet and beat these legal challenges. If you're not, then get the hell out of the road, make way for somebody who is prepared to take on these challenges. So, Dave, back to your question. The Scottish Parliament passes an act, and it has been suggested to me by a leading academic in constitutional affairs that this would have to be a provisional constitution. To make a constitutional change, it would actually have to establish a constitution. I'm grateful for that bit of advice, because that's a very good idea. And I don't know that it has to be that way, but it's certainly a good way of doing it. That based on the claim of right, the relevant parts of the claim of right, none of that anti-Catholic pish, which isn't relevant anymore. You know, it's not 1689 now. You know, so based on the claim of right and Scotland's ancient constitution, Scotland's ancient parliament reasserts itself with a new constitution, with a constitution based on the claim of right. That may seem a little bit vague. The details of that have to be worked out. There's got to be something left to loose, something left flexible, so that those who are involved can adapt to circumstances as they arise at the time. But it definitely must be the Scottish Parliament taking the power to hold a proper constitutional referendum. That power has to be taken. It cannot be given. And even if it could be given, it wouldn't be given. So it has to be taken. That is the only way. There is no other way. So the Scottish Parliament takes that power, and the next thing is to pass an act on a proposal for a proper constitutional referendum. Actually, a proposal to dissolve the Union, subject to, first of all, ratification by the Parliament, obviously. It becomes an act, and then it goes to a referendum of the people, who are asked to look at an actual proposal for dissolving the Union. This is what they're going to do. This is determinative and self-executing. It means this is a choice. It's not just a result in the referendum, it's a decision. It's a decision to do what is said in the proposal. And is self-executing. Basically, what that means is it can't be stopped. It becomes law as the very second the votes are counted. Scotland is an independent nation from the moment they get 50% plus one votes in that referendum. And that's the way we do it. That is the only way. I cannot see any other way. I do not know of any other way. There are a lot of people claiming that they know of other ways, and I have looked at them. I've examined them, and I've asked questions about them, usually without getting any kind of sensible answer. But none of these things work. Everything hinges on legislative competence. And when you think about it, it's not so unreasonable that we should take the power that I'm talking about, the power to hold a proper constitutional referendum. It's not unreasonable, because if you think about it, how did England get that power? Or now England as Britain? How did they get that power? They took it. They just took it. They imposed the Union on us, and they took it. And it could be argued, because the Acts of Union actually say that that Scotland keeps its existing constitution. So you could also say that that Westminster has taken that power, in the sense of all the breaches of the terms of the Acts of Union. That is committed in the last, 317 years? I don't know, my arithmetic's not that great. That's why we have Stephen Duncan. So it doesn't seem all that unreasonable for us to take back that which was taken from us. Hence, we get the slogan. I don't mind a good slogan, as long as it's meaningful, as long as it's not some mindless thing like, what do we want? Independence. When do we want it? Now. It actually describes the three things that we must do. We must take back our government, and then so that we can take back our parliament, so that we can then take back our nation. By take back our government, I mean to take back the parties that will form a government. We tell them that they must include in their constitution, in their manifesto for the 2026 election, a commitment to repossessing the Scottish Parliament's power to hold a constitutional referendum. They must commit to that, because nothing else works. Nothing else works. No parties are committing to that at the moment. So as far as I can see, it looks as if 2026 is going to be another massive disappointment. I started a petition. We thought, if there's going to be a show of people power here, the people, the independence movement, telling the politicians what we want, not idly sitting back and accepting whatever they offer, be it the SNP or ALAPA or whatever, because none of them are offering a solution. None of them. A lot of them are proclaiming that they're offering the solution, but if you look closely at what they're offering, it's no better, or perhaps only slightly better than what the SNP are offering. None of them actually have an end point that is independence. They all end at Westminster, talking at Westminster. That's not independence. So I've identified the only way it can happen, and it looks like that's not going to happen because the situation as it is at the moment is that the SNP is going to be the biggest party. Voter inertia, it's not my choice. I just accept that people will vote. Like I said earlier, they will vote not knowing that they're voting for an act of treachery. They will vote for the SNP thinking they're voting for independence, and then that'll turn into another massive disappointment. And every one of these disappointments knocks the wind out of the independence movement. It really knocks us down. We've had so many of these disappointments, been let down so often over the past 10, 11 years. And you see the way that the independence movement has declined in that time. They declined and fragmented. It's been horrible to watch, actually, but it's unfortunate. But it was always going to happen. Time alone will do that to any movement. You know, just leave it to its own devices without adequate leadership. And it will fragment. That'll happen every single time. It happens to all organizations where there is no effective leadership. So I wanted the independence movement to combine, so as to speak with one voice. There has to be a way for that voice to be heard. So I set up this petition for to demand that the nominally pro-independence parties actually adopt the manifesto for independence. I had hoped that that petition would take off and get thousands, tens of thousands of signatures, because it's a petition for the only way that we can initiate that process of restoring independence. The only way. I thought it would take off. I thought people would see it that it was the only way. I thought they would understand it, and that they would flock to it, and that simply hasn't happened. It's currently standing at under 800 signatures, and I set a target of 100,000 signatures, just so as to signify how important this is. With 100,000 signatures, we have a stick with which to beat even the SNP. If we were able to go to the SNP and say, look, there's 100,000 people that quite possibly won't vote for you if you don't adopt the manifesto for independence. And that's especially true if some other party did. If Alapa were to adopt the manifesto for independence, if they were to steal a march on the SNP, Alpa's figures would skyrocket. Their polling figures would take a leap. They would see a tremendous benefit from it, and that alone would scare the SNP. So one of the things that I had hoped for with this Manifesto for Independence campaign was that ALPA would see the sense of them doing it, because they've nothing to lose. They are not going to get anywhere in the 2026 election. If we take current polling, which is the only information-like thing that we have, it's the best thing, the best information we have, the closest thing to information. So we have to plan, or at least speculate, on the basis of what we know. And the SNP isn't going to disappear. I know a lot of people wish it would. And it's simply not going to happen. In fact, it'll probably be the Scottish government again. So then it will be then it'll be Swinney's Way, and it'll be a Section 30 request, and it'll be a knockback, and it will be another 5 years lost to add to the 10, 11 that have already been lost. And I don't think the independence movement can stand that. Eric Lowe says, Peter, the SNP government will never attempt to take power back because they're feared. Well, yeah, you're probably right, Eric. And one can't blame them because they're taking on the British state, and the British state's it can be a bit of a monster, especially when it's cornered. And anything that puts the union in jeopardy is that's going to get the British state baring its teeth. Jealous Britannia will be looking to tighten their grip on Scotland. Roderick Selby says, link here. I didn't see the petition. There's a scrolling. There should be a scrolling. I think it's not visible. Hang on a second. Let's see. There it is. That's the URL for the Manifesto for Independence petition. But in actual fact, all you have to do is go online and search for Manifesto for Independence or Scottish UDI, and you will get information there. Have a lovely website designed and built by David Herriot, which is doing a fine job. And there's different explanations there of what the Scottish UDI is about. Same information, but explained in different ways. I've been explaining it in different ways for well over 5 years now, possibly getting on for 6 years now. Right, our time is almost up. Half an hour ago, I was sitting here panicking because I was wondering what I was going to fill a half hour with. But I always seem to find something to talk about. If you get me started on the subject of the constitutional issue, I will always find something to say. And I know that a lot of the time I'll be repeating myself. And I really don't like that. But one thing I've learned is that in political campaigning, especially online political campaigning, repetition is essential. You just have to keep saying the same thing over and over again because you're reaching a different audience each time. It's not like the one message is reaching the whole audience. It's different messages reaching different audiences. So you've got to keep repeating things over and again. On my blog, I try to find different words to say the same thing, but that's not easy. There's just not that many words. My response to Stan Gradinsky should be online on my WordPress blog. It should be online now. On my Substack, it will be online shortly after I go off here. There doesn't seem to be a way to schedule the Substack blog articles. And they will also be published as a reply to Stan's letter as a comment, I should say, on Stan's letter in the National. I'm putting it online. I'm putting it on my website, on my blog site, because I know not everybody has access to the community section, the letters section of the National. So it's there so that everybody can read it. We're back on Sunday, and when I'll be with Stephen Duncan again. I have not a clue what we're going to be talking about. We have a production meeting. That's not too highfalutin a name for it. We have a production meeting tomorrow. We'll be deciding what we'll be talking about. But you can bet your life that Stephen will have some figures to lay waste to one of the myths around the constitutional issue. Till Sunday then. Bye for now.